The pen trembled in my weathered hands, not from age, but from the electric anticipation coursing through my veins. $25,000. The numbers stared back at me from the pristine white check, each digit a promise of something extraordinary, something that would crown 20 years of sacrifice with triumph. What I didn't know was that this check would become a weapon in a war I never saw coming. Charleston's evening light filtered through my study windows, casting golden shadows across the mahogany desk where Eleanor used to pay our bills. 20 years since cancer took her. 20 years of raising Eric alone, of being both mother and father, of turning a broken boy into the successful man he'd become. Every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every homework assignment I'd helped with, every tear I'd dried, it all led to this moment. My signature flowed across the paper with ceremonial precision. Richard Chandler, a name that meant something in this town, a name that would soon be celebrated at the most prestigious venue in Charleston, the Gadsden House. Just thinking about it made my chest swell with pride. Those magnificent white columns had witnessed Charleston's finest for over 2 centuries. My Eleanor had dreamed of our own wedding there once, back when we were young and broke. "Someday," she'd whispered, squeezing my hand as we walked past its iron gates. "When we have the money, Richard. When we're important enough." Well, Eleanor, I thought, sealing the envelope, someday is today. The phone's sharp ring shattered my reverie like a gunshot in a cathedral. Eric's name glowed on the screen, and my heart performed a familiar dance of paternal joy. My son, my greatest achievement. At 30, he still carried traces of the boy who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories. I could already hear the excitement in his voice, the gratitude, maybe even tears of joy. "Hello, son?" "Hey, Dad." The words landed wrong, too heavy, too careful. The enthusiasm I'd expected was nowhere to be found. "Are you busy?" he continued, and something cold began to creep up my spine. "Never too busy for you. I just finished writing that check. The venue deposit is all taken care of." I forced brightness into my voice, hoping to kindle some spark of his usual warmth. Silence. Deadly, suffocating silence. "About that, Dad." Eric's voice cracked like thin ice. "There's something I need to tell you." And just like that, the ground beneath my feet began to shift. "Lauren's been thinking," Eric continued, each word falling like stones into still water. "She wants a smaller wedding, more intimate, just her family." The room tilted. The golden light from the window suddenly felt harsh, accusatory. I gripped the phone tighter, certain I'd misheard. "Just her family," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, she feels it'll be simpler, less complicated. So, He paused, and I could hear him swallow hard. "Could you just send the check, Dad? We'll handle everything else." Less complicated. The words echoed in my skull like a death knell. 30 Chandlers, 3 generations of blood, sweat, and shared. Memory reduced to a complication. My hand found the check, and I stared at my fresh signature. The ink was still wet, still believing in a future that had just been murdered in cold blood. "Eric?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Are you telling me that your entire family, your father, your uncles, your cousins who taught you to fish, who cheered at every baseball game, who drove through snowstorms to celebrate your college graduation, were all uninvited from your wedding?" Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was small, defeated. "It's not like that, Dad. Lauren just wants it her way. You understand, right? It's her big day. Her big day." The words hit me like a slap across the face. In 47 years of life, through poverty and prosperity, through Eleanor's death and the lonely decades that followed, I had never felt such a complete dismissal of everything I held sacred. Marriage wasn't just about the bride. It was about 2 families becoming one. It was about legacy, tradition, the sacred bonds that connect us across generations. My Southern blood tempered by generations of gentlemen who understood honor. and family above all else began to simmer, but I didn't argue, not yet. Something deeper was stirring, a strategic patience I'd learned from my father, who taught me that the best battles are won before the enemy knows they're fighting. "We'll talk later, son," I said quietly. "Dad, you understand though, right? You're not upset?" "Upset?" I almost laughed. Upset was a mild inconvenience, a traffic jam, a burnt dinner. This was something else entirely. This was war. "We'll talk later, Eric," I repeated, and ended the call. I sat in my study as Charleston's evening sounds drifted through the windows, church bells, children laughing, the distant hum of King Street traffic. Normal sounds of a normal day. But nothing would ever be normal again, because what Eric and his precious Lauren didn't know was that I held all the cards, and I was about to play them. Sleep eluded me that night. I paced my bedroom like a caged panther, my mind churning with strategies and scenarios. By dawn, I'd made my decision. If I was going to war, I needed intelligence on my enemy. I called my nephew Marcus, Eric's closest cousin and former roommate. If anyone knew the real story behind this sudden family exile, it would be him. Uncle Richard. Marcus's voice was warm, unsuspecting. "Ready for the big day?" "I already bought my tux." My jaw clenched. "About that, Marcus, there's been a change of plans." 15 minutes later, I had the truth. And it was worse than I'd imagined. Lauren Bennett, future investment banker, Daddy's little princess, woman who'd never wanted for anything in her pristine life, had been systematically poisoning Eric against his own blood for months. She'd convinced him that the Chandlers were beneath the social circle she intended to inhabit, that our blue-collar roots and unpretentious ways would embarrass her in front of her country club friends. She actually said we were rough around the edges, Marcus told me, his voice tight with hurt. Eric tried to defend us, but she just laughed and said he'd understand once he met real society. As if 4 generations of honest work, military service, and community leadership meant nothing. As if the blood, sweat, and tears that built our family's reputation were somehow inferior to inherited money and social climbing. But the final insult came when Marcus revealed Lauren's ultimate plan. She intended to use my $25,000 deposit to fund her dream wedding, then slowly distance Eric from our family entirely. The wedding exclusion was just the beginning. She wanted to erase us completely, rewrite Eric's history with herself as the sole author. "Oh, Lauren Bennett, you picked the wrong family to cross." I hung up with Marcus and immediately called the one person in Charleston who could give me the ammunition I needed. Dolores Whitman, society columnist for the Charleston Mercury and keeper of every secret in our fine city. "Richard Chandler," Dolores's voice sparkled with genuine affection. "I heard congratulations are in order. Eric's marrying the Bennett girl." "That's actually why I'm calling, Dolores. Tell me about the Bennetts, everything." What I learned in the next hour would have made Sun Tzu proud. The Bennett's wealth was recent. Tech money, cryptocurrency, the kind of nouveau riche fortune that bought status but couldn't purchase respect. Old Charleston families like the Ravenels and the Pringles tolerated them but never truly accepted them. Brianna Bennett was desperate to break into Charleston's inner circle, and Lauren had inherited both her mother's social climbing instincts and her insecurities. More importantly, the Bennetts were leveraged to their perfectly styled eyebrows. The mansion, the cars, the country club memberships, all financed by loans against Frederick Bennett's volatile tech portfolio. One market downturn could topple their entire house of cards, but the most delicious detail came last. "Richard," Dolores whispered conspiratorially, "I shouldn't tell you this, but Lauren Bennett has quite the reputation for tactical relationships. There was the Hutchinson boy, old textile money, whom she dated for 2 years before dumping him when his family's fortune took a hit. Then the Morrison heir, until she discovered his trust fund was smaller than she'd hoped. Your Eric is successful, stable, and most importantly, completely devoted to her. She's finally found her golden goose. As I hung up, a plan began forming in my mind. Lauren Bennett wanted to play games with the Chandler family. She was about to learn that we'd been playing this game since before her great-grandfather struck oil. The war was about to begin. I spent the morning in my study, map spread, across the desk like a general planning a campaign. But these weren't battle maps. They were wedding vendor contracts, payment schedules, and legal documents. In my hands, they were weapons. At 2 p.m. sharp, I walked into Kayla Monroe's elegant office on Broad Street. The wedding planner looked up from her color-coordinated chaos with a professional smile that faltered when she saw my expression. "Mr. Chandler, how wonderful to see you. I was just finalizing the floral arrangements. Lauren has exquisite taste. The white roses alone will cost." "Kayla," I interrupted, my voice carrying the quiet authority that had served me well in business. "I need to discuss the contracts." She blinked, shuffled through her papers. Of course, everything seems to be in order. The deposit you provided has been distributed to... Stop, I held up my hand. "Read me the names on those contracts." Her brow furrowed as she scanned the documents. "Well, there's the venue contract with the Gadsden House, the catering contract with Magnolia and Grace." "That's right," I said, settling back in my chair with the satisfaction of a chess master revealing a long-planned trap, which means that nothing, absolutely nothing, can be modified, canceled, or finalized without my explicit written consent. Kayla's professional composure cracked. "Mr. Chandler, surely you don't mean to—" "I mean to exercise my contractual rights," I said smoothly. "Effective immediately. I'm placing a hold on all vendor communications and modifications until further notice. And please update the event listing from Bennett Chandler Wedding to Chandler Family Celebration." The color drained from her face entirely. "But, sir, the wedding is in 6 weeks. If we delay—" "Nothing is being delayed," I assured her, my smile sharp as a blade. "I'm simply ensuring that all parties have adequate time to reconsider their priorities." I left her office whistling an old hymn Eleanor used to love. The first battle was won, but I knew the real war was just beginning, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. My phone began ringing at 6:47 p.m. Eric, of course, his voice pitched higher than I'd heard since he was 12, and broke Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball. "Dad, what did you do?" "The wedding planner called Lauren, and now everything's frozen. The caterers won't return calls. The florist is asking for written authorization. Dad, you're ruining everything." I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for Eric's wedding toast, and settled into Eleanor's old reading chair. "I'm not ruining anything, son. I'm simply ensuring that all stakeholders have equal say in how my investment is utilized." "Your investment?" His voice cracked. "Dad, this is my wedding, is it?" I let the question hang in the air like smoke. "Because from where I sit, it sounds more like Lauren's coronation with my family cast as the unwashed peasants. Too embarrassing to witness her ascension to royalty." "It's not. Dad, you don't understand. Lauren's under a lot of pressure. Her parents have expectations." "And what about my expectations, Eric?" "What about the 30 people who've loved you since the day you were born, who celebrated every milestone, who were there when your mother died and you cried yourself to sleep for a year? Are we just supposed to disappear so Lauren can have her perfect Instagram photos?" The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "Dad," he finally whispered, "please, I'm begging you, don't do this." The boy in his voice nearly broke my resolve. Nearly. But then I remembered Marcus's hurt expression when he'd told me about being uninvited. I remembered my brother James, who'd driven 12 hours through a blizzard to attend Eric's college graduation. I remembered every Chandler who'd been erased with a casual wave of Lauren's manicured hand. "Eric," I said softly, "I love you more than life itself, but love without respect is just indulgence, and I will not be disrespected by anyone, not even you." I hung up and turned off my phone. The bourbon burned perfectly as it went down. Let them panic. Let them scramble. The real show was just beginning. The next morning brought visitors. I was enjoying my coffee and the morning paper when the doorbell rang with the aggressive persistence of someone accustomed to having doors opened. Quickly, through the peephole, I saw them. Brianna Bennett in her designer armor, Lauren beside her looking like she'd rather be anywhere else, and Eric hovering behind them both like a whipped dog. I took my time answering. Let them wait. Let them understand that this was my house, my rules. Well, I said, opening the door with Southern hospitality dripping from every word. What an unexpected pleasure. Please come in. They filed into my living room, Eleanor's living room, with its family photos and worn but dignified furniture. And I watched Lauren's nose wrinkle with barely concealed distaste. The contrast was deliberate. Let her see the difference between old money elegance and her family's flashy nouveau riche decorating. Brianna wasted no time. Richard, we need to resolve this situation immediately. You're holding up important vendor communications. I'm exercising my contractual rights, I replied, settling into my armchair like a king on his throne. As the primary contractor and financier of this event, I have certain concerns about the current arrangements. Lauren's composure finally cracked. Look, Mr. Chandler. Richard, I corrected gently. Richard, she continued through gritted teeth. I understand you're upset about the guest list, but this is my wedding. I should have some say in who attends. I studied her for a long moment, this pretty, pampered girl who thought she could erase 30 people with a casual decision. Of course you should, dear, just as I should have some say in how my $25,000 is spent. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I watched the calculation flicker across Brianna's eyes, the recognition that they needed me more than I needed them. Perhaps, Brianna said carefully, we could find a compromise. A smaller representation from your family? How small did you have in mind? I asked with mock interest. Well, Lauren jumped in, obviously emboldened by what she mistook for negotiation. Maybe just you and, I don't know, 1 or 2 others, the important ones? Important ones. As if love could be ranked. As if family bonds could be measured by bank accounts or job titles. I stood slowly, my 6-foot frame casting a shadow across their uncomfortable little group. When I spoke, my voice carried the quiet fury of a southern storm building on the horizon. Miss Bennett, I said each word, precise as a scalpel. Every single member of my family is important. My brother James, who spent his life savings to send Eric to summer camp when money was tight. My cousin Sarah, who flew in from California when Eric had pneumonia and I couldn't take time off work. My nephew Marcus, who's been Eric's best friend. Since they were in diapers? I moved closer and I saw Lauren shrink back slightly. These aren't just names on a guest list, dear. They're the people who made Eric into the man you claim to love. And if they're not good enough for your wedding, then perhaps Eric isn't good enough for you either. The silence that followed was electric. Eric's face had gone white, Lauren's had gone red, and Brianna looked like she was calculating the exact cost of my defiance. Richard, Brianna said finally, her voice tight as a violin string, you're being unreasonable. We're offering a compromise. No, I said, returning to my chair with theatrical calm. You're offering an insult gift-wrapped as generosity. But here's what I'm offering. A full Chandler family presence at this wedding. Or no wedding at all. Lauren shot to her feet. You can't do that. I smiled, the kind of smile that had made grown men nervous in boardrooms for decades. Can't I? Kayla Monroe seems to think otherwise. Interesting how important contracts become when they're in the right name. The gauntlet was thrown, the lines were drawn, and I was just getting started. They left my house in a storm of threats and ultimatums, but I could see the fear in their eyes. Good. Fear makes people careless, and careless people make mistakes. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I had one more card to play. A nuclear option I'd discovered during my conversation with Dolores Whitman. The Gadsden House had a very particular clause in their rental agreement. Any event that resulted in significant disruption to the venue's reputation or operations could be canceled immediately, with all deposits refunded to the contracting party. It was their protection against bridezillas and wedding disasters that might damage their pristine reputation, and thanks to my morning phone calls, I now knew exactly how to trigger that clause. You see, Lauren had made a critical error. In her eagerness to exclude my family, she'd boasted about it to the wrong people. Dolores had received calls from 3 different Charleston Society matrons, all expressing their concern about the Bennett girls' unfortunate display of poor breeding in excluding the groom's family from the wedding. In Charleston, reputation is currency, and Lauren Bennett had just gone bankrupt. But I wasn't going to use this information yet. No, this was my insurance policy, my final gambit for when the enemy thought they had me cornered. For now I had other plans. Sometimes the best revenge is giving people exactly what they ask for. 3 days of radio silence followed our confrontation. Eric tried calling twice, but I let the machine take it. I needed him to understand the gravity of his choices, to feel the weight of a world without his father's support. On Thursday evening, my strategy bore unexpected fruit. I was reading in my study when the phone rang. Unknown number, but something made me answer. "Mr. Chandler?" The voice was young, male, nervous. "This is Jake Morrison. I'm one of Eric's friends from college." I remembered Jake, quiet kid, good family, had always been respectful when he visited. "Hello, Jake. What can I do for you?" "Sir, I probably shouldn't be calling, but I thought you should know something." "About Eric and Lauren." My pulse quickened. "Go on." "Well, last night a bunch of us went to Prohibition downtown. You know, the bar on Spring Street? Eric was there and he looked pretty rough, like he hadn't been sleeping." I said nothing, letting the silence encourage him to continue. "Anyway, Lauren showed up with her bridesmaids around 10. Thing is, she didn't see Eric. He was sitting in this dark corner booth and she just walked right past him. She was talking pretty loud, probably had too much wine, and I prompted. And she said some things about the wedding, about your family." Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Chandler, she called y'all embarrassing country bumpkins who would ruin the photos. She said the wedding would be perfect because Eric's trashy family won't be there to drag down the class level." The words hit me like physical blows, but beneath the hurt was something else. Vindication. Finally, Eric would see what we'd all seen from the beginning. "Did Eric hear this?" I asked. "Yes, sir." His face. "Mr. Chandler, I've never seen him look like that, like his whole world just collapsed. He didn't say anything to her, just sat there staring. But when she left, he called me over and asked me to drive him home. He was shaking, sir. Actually shaking. Perfect. The enemy had just destroyed herself with her own words. "Jake," I said carefully, "you're a good friend for telling me this, but I need you to promise me something. Don't tell Eric we talked. Let him work through this himself." "Yes, sir. I thought you should know. Your family doesn't deserve that kind of talk." After Jake hung up, I sat in my chair and smiled for the first time in days. Sometimes the best warfare is simply allowing your enemies to reveal their true nature. Now I just had to wait for Eric to call. The call came at 11:43 p.m. I was reading in bed when the phone buzzed with Eric's name. When I answered, I could hear the defeat in his breathing before he spoke a word. "Dad," his voice was raw, broken. "I messed up. I messed up so bad." I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. God, Dad, I heard her. Talking about our family like we were trash, like you were trash. "After everything you've done for me, everything you've sacrificed." He broke off, and I could hear him crying. Actually crying. My 30-year-old son, reduced to tears by the woman who claimed to love him. "Eric," I said gently, "I'm so sorry." "Dad, I'm so ashamed." I let her convince me that somehow our family wasn't good enough, that you weren't good enough. How could I believe that? How could I be so stupid? Now was the moment. Strike while the iron was hot, while his defenses were down, while he could see clearly what Lauren Bennett really was. Son, I said, my voice, carrying 20 years of love and disappointment. The question isn't how you could believe it. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know, his voice cracked with desperation. The wedding's in 5 weeks. Everything's planned. Her parents have spent a fortune. If I call it off now... If you call it off now, you'll save yourself a lifetime of being ashamed of who you are, I said firmly. But Eric, I'm not asking you to call off your wedding. I'm asking you to remember who you are. You're a Chandler. We don't abandon family, and we don't let anyone else abandon us either. But what can I do? Lauren will never change her mind. She hates confrontation. And her mother? Leave that to me, I said, my smile audible, even over the phone. I'm going to have a conversation with the Bennett women, a very enlightening conversation. Dad, what are you planning? Oh, my sweet, naive son, you're about to see what happens when someone declares war on the wrong family. Just trust me, Eric. And remember, you're my son before you're anyone's fiancé. That will never change. No matter who you marry. As I hung up, I felt the familiar thrill of a plan coming together. Tomorrow, I would show Lauren Bennett exactly who she was dealing with, and she was going to learn that some wars can't be won with money or social status. Some wars require something she'd never possessed: honor. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect weather for what I had planned. I dressed carefully in my best Navy suit, the one Eleanor always said made me look distinguished and dangerous. Today, I needed both qualities. I arrived at the Bennett mansion at precisely 10 a.m. The house was everything I'd expected, massive, gleaming, and somehow soulless despite its price tag. New money architecture, all flash and no substance, like the family that inhabited it. Brianna answered the door herself, clearly not expecting me. Her smile was plastic, professional, the kind of expression that could be turned on and off like a light switch. Richard, what a surprise. I'm afraid Lauren isn't actually, Mrs. Bennett. It's you I came to see. I stepped into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. We need to have a conversation about the future of this wedding. Her hospitality mask slipped slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you know exactly what I mean. I moved into their cavernous living room, taking note of every expensive, tasteless detail. Your daughter has made some very interesting decisions about my family's involvement in this celebration. I'm here to discuss the consequences. Brianna's laugh was sharp, brittle. Consequences? Richard, I think you're being a bit dramatic. Am I? I turned to face her fully, and she took an involuntary step backward. Let me paint you a picture. Mrs. Bennett, your daughter wants to use my money to fund her perfect wedding, while excluding every person who matters to the groom. That's not just disrespectful, it's stupid. Now, see here. No, you see here. My voice dropped to the dangerous quiet that had terrified opposing lawyers for decades. I control every vendor contract for this wedding, every single one. And unless your daughter adjusts her attitude and her guest list, there won't be a wedding at all. Brianna's face went through several interesting color changes. You wouldn't dare. Try me. That's when Lauren appeared at the top of the stairs. Having obviously been listening, she descended like a queen approaching peasants, her chin raised in defiance. Mr. Chandler, she said coolly, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I replied, just a revelation of character. My character? She laughed, but it sounded forced. I'm trying to plan a beautiful, tasteful wedding. If that offends you. What offends me, Miss Bennett, is your casual dismissal of 30 people who've been nothing but kind to you. What offends me is your assumption that my money comes with no strings attached. But most of all, what offends me is your treatment of my son. Lauren's mask slipped entirely. Your son loves me. He'll do whatever I ask. There it was, the truth beneath all the sugarcoating. Perhaps, I said, my smile cold as winter. But he doesn't control the vendor contracts. I do. And unless you're prepared to start over with 5 weeks to plan a wedding, you'll accommodate my family. This is blackmail, Brianna sputtered. This is business, I corrected. Something your family should understand given your financial situation. Both women went very still. They hadn't expected me to know about the Bennett's leveraged lifestyle, their precarious financial position. But information is power, and I'd done my homework. What do you want? Lauren asked finally, her voice small. Everything, I thought. I want my son back, my family respected, and your entitled attitude shattered beyond repair. But what I said was 50-50. Equal families, equal representation, and a toast at the reception, acknowledging both sides. Fine, Lauren spat. But that's it. No other demands. I nodded graciously. Of course, I'm a reasonable man. What I didn't tell her was that reasonable. Men sometimes have unreasonable backup plans. The next 3 weeks passed in a flurry of wedding preparations. To outside observers, everything seemed normal. Lauren had grudgingly added 30 Chandlers to the guest list. Vendor communications resumed, and Eric seemed relieved that the crisis had passed. But I knew better. I'd won the battle, not the war. During this peaceful interlude, I quietly continued my intelligence gathering. I had coffee with various Charleston society ladies, attended church functions where tongues wagged freely, and maintained my network of well-placed informants. What I learned was fascinating. Lauren hadn't accepted defeat. She'd simply changed tactics. Instead of excluding us entirely, she was now planning what she called damage control. She'd arranged for the Chandler tables to be placed as far from the head table as possible, scheduled the family photos to minimize our presence, and even suggested a casual dress code that she hoped would make us look underdressed compared to her designer-clad relatives. More concerning, she'd been systematically poisoning Eric against our family traditions. No father-son dance, too old-fashioned. No sharing of family stories during speeches, too time-consuming. No display of family photos, too cluttered. She was methodically erasing every trace of Chandler heritage from what should have been a celebration of two families joining. But Lauren Bennett had made one critical error. She'd underestimated exactly how far a Southern father would go to protect his family's honor. During this period, I also received an unexpected ally. Dolores Whitman called with delicious news. "Richard," she whispered over the phone like we were sharing state secrets. "You'll never guess what I heard at the country club yesterday. Millicent Ravenel, old Charleston royalty, was talking about the Bennett wedding. Apparently, word has gotten out about Lauren's little guest list manipulation. And the old families are not pleased." My pulse quickened. How not pleased? Enough that 3 prominent families have declined their invitations. They're calling it poor form to exclude the groom's family. Richard in Charleston society, that's the kiss of death. Lauren's reputation is hanging by a thread. I absorb this information with growing satisfaction. Sometimes the best warfare is simply watching your enemies destroy themselves. But here's the truly delicious part, Dolores continued. I heard from my source at the Gadsden house that they're concerned about the social controversy surrounding the event. Apparently, they've had inquiries from other clients asking if this is the kind of family drama they typically host. Perfect. The nuclear option I discovered was becoming more viable by the day. Dolores, I said carefully, hypothetically speaking, what would happen if the Gadsden house decided the social controversy was damaging their reputation? Hypothetically, her voice carried a knowing smile. They'd cancel the contract and refund the deposit. They've done it before. Remember the Ashford wedding scandal in '98? As I hung up, I felt the familiar thrill of a plan reaching its climax. All the pieces were falling into place. Lauren thought she'd won, thought she'd contained the damage, and secured her perfect wedding. She had no idea that the real fireworks were still to come. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source, Lauren herself. It was 2 weeks before. The wedding when Eric called me, his voice strange, hollow and confused. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Always, son. Is our family are we really embarrassing? Are we beneath the Bennetts somehow?" The question pierced my heart. This was what Lauren had done to my confident, accomplished son, filled him with shame about the people who'd loved him unconditionally his entire life. "Eric," I said carefully, "what brought this on?" She's been saying things about how her friends might react to Uncle James's accent, about how Cousin Sarah's kids might not behave properly at such a sophisticated event. She keeps talking about maintaining standards and appropriate behavior, and I'm starting to feel like I'm apologizing for my own family. The fool had overplayed her hand? "Son," I said gently, "do you remember your mother's funeral?" "Of course I do. Do you remember who held you up when you couldn't stand? Who organized the food, who cleaned the house, who made sure you had clean clothes for school every day for months while I was drowning in grief?" His voice broke slightly. "The family. That's right. You're embarrassing beneath the Bennett's family. They didn't ask for thanks, didn't expect repayment, didn't check your social status before they loved you. They just showed up because that's what family does. Silence. Then, Dad, I think I've been an idiot. We all make mistakes, son. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" But before he could answer, fate intervened in the most spectacular way possible. The call came at 8:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Eric's voice was different this time, not broken, but burning with a cold fury I'd never heard from him before. "Dad, I need to see you. Now. Tonight." "Of course. Are you all right?" "No, I'm not all right. I'm not all right at all." He arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing his work clothes, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. In his hand was his phone, and his eyes held the look of a man who'd just seen his entire world reshape itself. "Dad," he said without preamble, "I recorded something tonight. I need you to hear it." He set his phone on my desk and pressed play. Lauren's voice filled the room, crystal clear and utterly damning. "Oh, please, Brittany. Eric's family is a complete embarrassment. His father thinks he's some kind of Southern gentleman, but he's just a glorified mechanic who got lucky. And don't even get me started on the rest of them. They're like something out of a trashy reality show." Another voice, one of her bridesmaids. "But won't Eric be upset if they're not invited?" Lauren's laugh was like breaking glass. "Eric will. Get over it. He's so desperate to please me. He'd probably thank me for sparing him the humiliation. Besides, once we're married and move to Charlotte, we'll barely see them anyway. I'll make sure of that. What about his father's money? What about it? Once we're married, Eric will have access to everything anyway. The old man can write all. The checks he wants, I'll just make sure they're written for things that benefit us, not his pathetic family reunion fantasies." The recording ended, leaving a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Eric's face was white with rage and shame. "Dad, I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea she thought—" He couldn't finish the sentence. I studied my son, this young man I'd raised to be honorable, who'd somehow lost his way in the maze of Lauren Bennett's manipulation. The hurt was there, deep and real, but underneath it was something else. Relief. Finally he could see clearly. "Eric," I said quietly, "what do you want to do?" His laugh was bitter. "What I want to do is call off this whole charade. But Dad, the wedding's in 11 days. The deposits, the vendors, the guests who've already made travel plans." "Son," I said, standing and walking to my desk. I pulled out a folder I'd been preparing for weeks, my nuclear option, my final strategy. "What if I told you there was a way to cancel everything cleanly, get the money back, and expose Lauren Bennett for exactly what she is?" His eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I smiled, feeling the satisfaction of a chess master revealing checkmate. "I mean that your fiancée has made more enemies than she realizes, and some of them have the power to destroy her perfect wedding with a single phone call. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. Sometimes it's letting everyone see exactly who won and why. I opened the folder and spread the contents. Across my desk, like a general revealing battle plans, Eric leaned forward, his eyes scanning the documents with growing amazement. "Dad, what is all this?" "This," I said, tapping the first document, "is a copy of the Gadsden House's cancellation clause. Any event that brings significant social controversy or reputational damage can be terminated immediately, with full refund to the contracting party." "And this?" Eric pointed to a stack of printed emails, communications from 3 of Charleston's most influential families, declining their wedding invitations due to concerns about the social appropriateness of the event. Apparently, word of Lauren's family exclusion tactics has spread through Charleston society faster than kudzu in summer. Eric's mouth fell open. "They declined because of what Lauren did to our family." "Old Charleston doesn't forget its manners, son, and deliberately insulting the groom's family is considered the height of poor breeding." I pulled out another document. This is a letter from Millicent Ravenel herself, expressing her disappointment in the Bennett family's display of poor character. "But how did you—" "I've lived in this town for 47 years, Eric. I know where the bodies are buried." I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the look of dawning comprehension on his face. "Your precious Lauren thought she could play social politics with a family that's been here since before the Civil War. She was wrong." Eric was staring at the papers like they held the secrets of the universe. "So you could cancel the whole thing? Get all the money back?" "I could, but Eric, that's not what I want." His head snapped up. "What?" I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Charleston morning. "Son, I don't want to destroy your wedding. I want to save it. I want to turn it into something worthy of both our families." "I don't understand." I turned back to him, and in that moment I saw not the confused young man who'd been manipulated by a social climber, but the little boy who used to ask me to check for monsters under his bed. "Eric, what if we gave Lauren exactly what she deserves? What if we let her have her perfect wedding, but on our terms? Because the sweetest victory isn't crushing your enemy. It's making them grateful for your mercy." The final confrontation took place in my study the next afternoon. Lauren and Brianna arrived exactly on time, their faces set in expressions of grim determination. They thought they were coming to negotiate. They had no idea they were walking into an execution. Eric sat beside me, his presence both support and witness to what was about to unfold. He'd insisted on being here, on finally standing up to the woman who'd nearly turned him against his own blood. "Richard," Brianna began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we understand you have some concerns about the wedding arrangements." "No," I interrupted, my voice cutting through her diplomatic nonsense like a knife. "You understand nothing, but you're about to." I opened my folder and spread the documents across the coffee table, like evidence in a trial. Both women's eyes widened as they recognized what they were seeing. "Mrs. Bennett, Miss Bennett," I said formally, "you are looking at the complete documentation of your social destruction, letters from the Ravenels, the Pringles, and the Rutledges, Charlestons, holy trinity of old society, expressing their disgust with your family's behavior. Email communications from vendors expressing concern about the social controversy surrounding this event. And, most importantly, the Gadsden House's cancellation clause, the wedding war.